This podcast is brought to you by the Heldridge Hotel, New Brunswick's only 4-star hotel and a preferred hotel of Rutgers football fans. The Heldridge helps you make the most of your game day weekend, providing premium accommodations in the cultural heart of downtown New Brunswick. Restaurants, bars, theaters, parks, museums, and more are only steps away. Whether you're traveling alone or with a large group, book your stay at the Heldridge and make the most of your game day weekend. Visit theheldridge.com today.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politti here. We are going to Indianapolis, baby. Steak and Shake at 3 a.m. We're going to burn our nose hairs at an overrated steakhouse. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to the Idle York Museum of American Indians and Western Art. You know what that is? It's the museum across from the JW Marriott. And on my first 117 trips to Indianapolis, I've looked at that museum and said, you know, someday I'm going to go to that museum. This is not going to, I'm never going to go to that museum, but I'm probably not going to Indianapolis at all. But still, the Scarlet Knights, guys, going to Indianapolis. Are you excited? Can you feel it? You get that chill up your spine?
This is how I know you've been to Indianapolis way too many times. One, that you're even contemplating going there.
To the Idle York?
And two, that you're taking shots at St. Elmo's. What is wrong with you? I love that place.
Come on, it's not. I think it's a good. It's a nice place in Indianapolis, but I wouldn't put it in the world's greatest steakhouse. That's all I'm going to say. That's all.
Sure, it's not the greatest culinary experience I've ever had in my life. And yes, you know, after you've had the cocktail 2 times, you've had it 1,000 times. I enjoy the shrimp cocktail. I think the steaks are fine. I like the ambiance.
You say it's fine, so it's a little overrated. You yourself are making the case for overrated here.
I have a little nostalgic feeling for it personally because I remember you and I, the first time I went, we sat at the bar and had our steaks and had our cocktails together. It's a nice little memory for me. Back when I was a young pub reporter, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I still don't have any idea what I'm doing. But it was just a nice memory that I had with you, and now you're ruining it by calling it overrated. I didn't
realize the veteran cynicism.
I didn't realize that it was a tender moment by the two of us. I had no idea. Now I feel bad. That's great. I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. Pat, what's your stance on the St. Elmo's experience?
Yeah, it's you have to do it when you go to Indianapolis. So I think it's very appropriately rated.
Right. Yeah. But then, you do it and then you do it every time because every trip to Indianapolis is the same trip. Let's be honest. It's the same trip. Same 4 places, except the Idle York. I'm telling you, we're all going.
It's the one way to make it different. But I will say that every time I go to Indianapolis, I always bring at least 1 jar of the St. Elmo's cocktail sauce and try to hold it over until the next time I go to Indianapolis. I have some in my fridge right now. Little drops left, but I'm hanging on for dear life.
Beautiful. All right. The reason for that trip, the reason for the season, the 95-85 victory over Southern Cal. I mean, just about as good a game as Rutgers has played this season, I think. Complete, certainly offensively, as well as we've seen them play. I don't know if it's the best game start to finish, but it's close. And there's 2 in a row now. We've talked about this. We're just not going to celebrate 500, which is where the team is now. But could have gone the other direction. It has not. They've pulled it back together. Promising signs.
They bounced back from the worst loss of the season, one of the worst losses of the season, to Iowa. And yes, they got smacked around in Oregon, but they won a big game in overtime against Washington on the road that you had to have if you wanted to make it to Indianapolis. And then they beat a team in USC that they should beat. This was a game that we circled as one of the 2 games at home in the stretch run of the year that you had to win if you had any hope of an at-large bid. Obviously, those hopes are gone and done with, but you still beat USC, and you probably still have to beat Minnesota to feel like you're winning the games you should. This was statistically the best offensive performance Rutgers has had as a Big Ten member against the Big Ten team. It edges out a game against Michigan State a couple years ago. They were like 1.35 points per possession, which is really, really, really good. That's their fourth best offensive efficiency margin in the Ken Pom era. And coincidentally, the number one is against Monmouth earlier this year. And they get to Nebraska on the road. So they have 3 of their top 10 most efficient offensive performances of the Ken Pom era of the 21st century have come this year.
Wow.
And this against USC, they went 50 from the field, 40% on 3, and 90% on free throws. Their first 50, 40, 90 game in quite some time. All this to say, this is the formula for Rutgers to have any hope of making a miracle run. They're just going to have to outscore teams. They're going to need Dylan Harper to play with the ball on a string, complete control, just playing at his pace and making everything work. Guys hitting shots, everyone kind of playing their role in the minutes they're playing, and doing enough defensively. They were not good defensively. They're never good defensively. They're not going to be a good defensive team, no matter who's out there. But they did enough, and more importantly, they scored enough. And if they have any hope of making a run, that's going to be what they have to do.
Yeah. And Pat, this was a different Dylan Harper. I mean, it was 25 points, 9 of 13 shooting, 9 assists, right?
Yeah.
6 steals. These are okay. This is a complete player now. If he can distribute the ball like that, a good offense can become a great offense.
And the way that he scored the ball too, like personally, that was one of his best, most impressive performances from that aspect as well. So completely well-rounded. This was the most complete performance. It's no surprise that Dylan Harper's probably best game resulted in the team's best offensive game. No surprise there at all. So yeah, that's, like Brian said, the formula for success. It's kind of unfathomable to think of Rutgers winning a 95-85 game under Steve Peichel. But here they are. And it just kind of to me, I just kept thinking this adds to the what if, if this happened a month ago? What if this all came together, a month ago? And I'm sure, I talked to a lot of fans at the game. They were all having these same conversations, and obviously we could talk about that at some point too. But
tell us now, what was it like in the crowd? I mean, you did a fan story. You talked to a lot of people.
It was the same criticisms that we've brought up on this podcast many times. Right, the supporting cast hasn't done enough. The unfortunate availability issues of Dylan Harper. The injuries and the lack of a center were basically the talking points that have trickled down and been debated throughout the fan base. So I thought there would be a lot more heat and on Peichel from the fans, but it seemed like it was mixed. Some people were very upset about the job he's done, and some have given him that a pass, for lack of a better phrase. So I think overall it was kind of the bitterly disappointed was the general consensus of everyone. There were some harsh words like disgusted and just generally people upset that this was supposed to be the season of all seasons, but that's to be expected, right? These are fans. And I think when you can't come into the season with as high expectations as they had, this is just how it played out. And that's it.
Yeah. It does seem like the what if factor, Brian. That's what I do come back to that one when you have an effort like this. It really does even make it more frustrating for me as an observer to see this, to see the team to play what it did, to know the games they threw away early in the season. We don't have to go through them again, but we can. Penn State, Princeton, Kennesaw, all these opportunities. You flip 4 of them and you're sitting there going, okay, well, we got a shot,
That's like saying if Rutgers was a different team, they'd have a shot, right? You're talking about games they blew in November. They blew a game last week against Iowa, who's not good.
I know. This team, I understand. Yeah.
To me, the biggest what if is always whenever Dylan Harper has a game like this, when Ace Bailey has a game where he's making every shot known to man, right? That's the frustration to me, because you have these unbelievable offensive talents that you did not do enough around to add supplemental scoring and defense around them, right? You talk about Dylan Harper having a great game distributing the ball. I agree. I think he's had many good games distributing the ball this year. Yesterday, they just happened to hit shots. right? Because I think he's created a lot of opportunities for players on his team that just didn't hit shots. There was a stretch to start the second half. He finds Lathan Somerville on back-to-back plays when he's getting blitzed on pick and rolls, and Lathan hits the shots. He finds Dylan Grant on a mid-range jumper that he hits, right? Sometimes these shots just don't go down. So I think that, to me, has to be the most frustrating part, is that you had the foundation with these two guys. And I think to round the point on Pat's story, like, I think it's well-timed. People were complaining that we wrote the story the day they won a game against USC, right? But that kind of, the point is there, right? Like, it's a good game that they won, and it's hard to overcome the frustration with what this team, in theory, could have been. But the biggest point I want to make here, they beat two bad teams this week. They beat Washington, which is probably going to finish last in the Big Ten, and they beat USC, which has a 5-man rotation, 6-7 guys that play, but really a 5-man rotation, two guys that are really, really good, and then a couple of other guys that can play. You know, it would be one thing if they beat a Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State. That's one thing. To beat bad teams, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well taken. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no question. Yeah, they still haven't done it against a really good team. They get 2 shots now. I mean, you get at Purdue, at Michigan, to see if they can do it on the road against one of the better teams. Although, you know, neither one is. Certainly Purdue is not playing great at this point, getting smoked by Indiana. But still, you know, that would count as a very good win, high level win. Yeah, it's interesting. So many things about this team. Like, if you told me a Rutgers team would hit 26 of 28 free throws, I would have like, that's funny. Like, you get 28 free throws, 14 to 28. I would have banked on. So many things this team does. You're just like, wow, I've never seen that from Rutgers before. You know, I mean, it's just. It's just that stuff to me, just head scratching.
The 95 points in itself is
95, exactly 95 points.
Scoring that the stat lines that Brian threw out and the points per possession, you're like, oh my god,
55.6 from the field.
Yeah,
right. It's incredible. Gave up 18 offensive rebounds, still won.
Yeah,
10. Yeah.
This is the antithesis of the Steve Peichel team. This is the same program that 2 years ago beat Seton Hall 44-42 or whatever that score was. They scored literally twice as many points and gave up twice as many points in regulation, right? Like that. This is a different team, and that's the shame of it, because they're so much more fun offensively. Yeah. I know people loved those vintage Steve Peichel teams. They got all riled up for those big, great defensive possessions, but objectively, it was some eye-bleeding basketball sometimes. Just awful to watch. This team is freaking fun, man. And it's just, they can't make it worth it on the offensive, on the defensive end. I do think it's interesting. It's probably not fair to compare this. It's a game against USC in late February when the team is going nowhere. I just didn't feel much of a crowd last night, at least not a vintage Rat crowd. It just felt kind of like the people were there, to their credit. People are still showing up. They're getting their money's worth with the season tickets they paid an arm and a leg for. But the juice is just not really anywhere close to what it's been in the past. Understandably so, but that just really stood out to me last night.
The stakes aren't there. That's the reason. It's not the same as when you're playing for something that didn't say, but when you're playing for, dinner at St. Elmo's aside, when you're playing for a berth at Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament, it's not the same level as playing for, to get on the right side of the bubble. It's just not. So I think that's part of it, certainly. But
I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on the hypothetical of, like, let's say the stakes were there. I still think an offensive geared team, which wouldn't get the same, I don't know what the word is, buzz off of this crowd as like those teams that got 4, 5, 6 straight. You know what I'm saying? It just feels like Rutgers is a program that appreciates that side of the floor more than the offensive fireworks. I could be wrong. I'm really just pulling this out of my butt, right? But it feels like to me.
Yeah, it always just feels like defense is like crowd impacts football, basketball, either way, right? Like you're quiet on offense because you don't want to impact that, the mind games of an offensive possession. So I think that's probably it. And, your defense, you're on your feet and you're trying to, unseat the offensive player.
Could be. It could be. Maybe they just, I don't know. I think I have to go back to, Southern Cal on a Sunday night, 6 o'clock to get, to climb into 13th place isn't quite the same as, playing top ranked Purdue with a chance to get to the later tournament. I could be wrong, but that's my sense. big picture wise, programmatically, I think there's some good news in that game. Brian Dorsch looks like a player. I thought that, well, first we should address the fact the center position to begin with, Manny Bole rising from the dead. It's a miracle. It's a miracle, or it's malpractice. One or the other. I don't know. I just saw that. You're like, you lost for the season. No, yeah, he's back. He's coming in. So I don't know. Yeah, that was wild. What happened there?
So it's Bryce Dortch, just to be clear. I love my name.
What did I say?
You said Brian
Dortch. I'm sorry. Bryce Dortch. Yes.
Okay.
I know it's Bryce Dortch.
With Manuel Bole, somebody messed up. Either the training staff underestimated how long or overestimated how long he'd be out. The surgeons overestimated how long he'd be out. The program prematurely said he'd be out for the year and then just didn't say anything until the day of the game where it's like, oh, man, he's back. Somebody got something wrong, and medicine is not an exact science, as weird as that is to say, but this has become a pattern for this program where, 2 months ago, Dylan Harper is sick as a dog, like could barely function and is not put on the availability report, even as questionable, right? And he's clearly out for the game. Ace Bailey is allegedly sick at Maryland and then gets pulled out of the game and is never on the availability report. Now you have Manuel Bole, who allegedly was going to be out for the whole year, comes back in less than a month. The guy got hurt, had surgery, and came back in a game in less than a month on a season-ending injury. I mean, I would say only at Rutgers. I don't know for a fact it's only at Rutgers. It feels like it's only at Rutgers. This happened with football, too. Tyler Needham was out for the year at right tackle, and then suddenly, the season finale, he's out there at tight end against Michigan State. So this isn't even a Rutgers basketball thing. This is a Rutgers thing. It's a little different when you're starting center versus your right tackle. Anyway, Manuel Bole played 2 minutes. He was probably winded because he has one practice in the past month, and he was so excited to be on the court. He commits the only, inbounding violation I've seen probably in my decade covering Rutgers basketball.
They were a rough 2 minutes.
Yes. But the fact he's back is positive. You give him 2 weeks to get in shape. You have an extra body for the Big Ten tournament. Maybe in 10 years, we'll be talking about the Manuel Bole resurgence that led Rutgers to the NCAA tournament. He'll be like the DJ Burns of the Rutgers basketball program. Anyway, Bryce Dortch had his best game by far. 9 points, 4-4 shooting. He entered the game in his first 8 games having made 1 shot, 2 points. So a little bit of an offensive, and it's not like he was hitting tough shots, right? He had a couple putbacks. He had a nice layup while being defended. But it is a positive step forward on that end. It wasn't great defensively. No one on the Rutgers was great defensively, but it's encouraging to see him take steps forward offensively. Is he going to save the season? I don't think so. But it's good. It's a positive sign. And when you're at this point this season, anything positive is something you accept and take and are glad with.
Right. Yeah. And I like what he said after the game, too. You pulled out his quote about it when his first appearance. I assume it's his first appearance in the post-game media scrum. He looked like he was a guy you want to see in there more often because he gave some great quotes. I said, I think when you asked him about the players coming back,
Jerry Carino asked him.
Yeah, when Jerry Carino asked the question about the players coming back, meaning him, Lathan Somerville, and Dylan Grant, he said, I think it's going to be great and special, really special to see. Us three are really close, and I'm glad we're going to be back next year. And it's us building that chemistry. I've heard in college basketball, a lot of people go elsewhere. We're all locked in. We're all staying together. We're all close friends. Again, I understand this is, if they're all on the portal on, whenever it opens, I will not be surprised. But that would be, if you're trying to look forward to what's going to happen next year, certainly those 3 guys are part of this. I think it'll be easier to keep them under in the post-house settlement world. We'll talk about that in a minute, where you can pay them and you don't have to worry about NIL poachers necessarily to the highest degree when you can, put them on salary. I think that's important. Certainly it is good to have, you've got 3 building blocks. You need much more. You need a lot out of the portal to make this team competitive next year, but that's encouraging at least.
In an ideal world, you keep those 3 guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Rutgers fans learned last year that sometimes guys having quotes during the season that they're going to come back during the portal era is always a bit premature, and especially so when it's one guy speaking for a group of 3 guys. And just speaking candidly, right. Bryce Dortch is probably the least valuable of the 3, right? So he probably has the most skin in the game to stay. Right. That's just that's not a diss of Bryce Dortch. That's just the reality, right? Dylan Grant and Lathan Somerville, if they go in the open market, we'll get a very decent amount of interest, right? So that will be the challenge for Steve Peichel, the number one challenge entering the offseason will be keeping those guys and creating that foundation. If they keep those 3 guys, I feel decently well about kind of the floor for next season. We're a little ways away from talking about that. I think the offseason construction will be a different conversation. And I think, again, not just this quote, not to pick on Bryce George, because I agree. I thought he was great in the interview room, especially for a first-timer. I think he's a smart guy, engaging guy, and we appreciate every quote we get. But I just think every time we get a quote like this from a player during the season, you take it with as much salt as there is in the ocean. Like, just wait for the portal to open, wait for it to close, and then we'll have the real results. Everything else is kind of just air.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the biggest question is going to be what Steve Peichel's plan is. And if there's going to be a plan, there's got to be a plan for building this team smartly. I think that's a good transition to my interview with Ryan Pisarri. And this is finally after 6 months and some negotiations behind the scenes. We've sat down with Ryan on Friday, had a good conversation with him. We can go through all the highlights, but one thing he did say, and I think this is important in the context of the basketball conversation, is that, they're going to hire a GM. Like, they're going to modernize this program. That's happening. That's not like, well, they need to do it. The process is underway. Like, he was clear about that. And for me, I think that the significance of that is it's the first step, right, to kind of getting Steve Peichel, who you can scream all you want about him. If you're on the anti-Peichel side, he is signed through 2031. There is nothing to do here but support him in any way you can and try to nudge him towards to moving toward this, figuring out this world of college basketball. So now he's going to have, somebody who can navigate the portal and somebody who can navigate the resources and someone who can find resources for him, in this world. And I think that's going to be a really important hire, crucial hire, critical. I can't screw that up. You got to find someone who can, A, raise money, and B, evaluate players, right? As you make this a professional operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like you said, will just add so much value to the program. There's no question about it. It's really, I'm sure we have a lot to talk about the new world of college athletics and where everything's headed. So yeah, I think it's critically important. And like we said before, if there was a big criticism from the fan base about what's happened this year, it's roster construction and how that's kind of unfolded, what happened in the transfer portal, not just this year, but the way people have left this program for lack of opportunities as well. So you would think that a general manager would be able to help out in that situation as well.
To not have a general manager in today's era is like not having a head coach, right? Like, this is the bare minimum Rutgers should do. And this is obviously Monday morning quarterbacking 2020 hindsight. Rutgers probably should have got one last offseason in preparation for this once in a lifetime season, so that Steve Peichel isn't stretched thin like a lot of coaches are, right? But that would require being forward thinking. And Rutgers, like a lot of these college athletics programs, are reactionary instead of whatever the opposite of reactionary is. I can't think of the proactive. They're not proactive, they're reactive. But anyway, it's a positive sign that they are not falling completely behind the times and do plan on hiring someone. This will help Steve Peichel immensely, just being able to navigate, assuming they make a good hire, to navigate the transfer portal and be prepared for that stretch, knowing who to identify, which players to fit the mold, another just eyes and ears in the room, right? I think they do need some fresh, view, perspective in that room, having Steve Peichel being there for a long time, Brandon Knight being there for a long time, TJ Thompson, Jay Young. It's been a lot of the same nucleus. I think that fresh eyes would be a very strong positive for this group. And again, like the off-court stuff, right? Like Steve Peichel clearly is not great at that. That's the proof is in the pudding this offseason and how much he was able to raise money and what he was able to do with it. Now you have someone whose job is to do that. That is certainly a positive. And I think that it was good news to hear that from Ryan Pisarri. That was one of the main takeaways. It was good to hear from Ryan Pisarri that they're going to use the $20.5 million. They're going to spend all the money they can. It is infuriating that nobody will tell you how much of it is going to which program. Like it's a state secret. You think like these guys work at Guantanamo. They can't tell you anything.
I mean, I can tell you that, but I don't think there's much mystery there. And I pressed them on it and I asked them and some schools are doing it. Some schools are not doing it. I don't know why Rutgers hasn't done it. Doesn't mean they won't do it. going forward. But I mean, $20.5 million, you can chalk up 15 for football, around 3 for basketball, I think, and the rest for spread it out to however you see it. So, something around those lines. 15.5.
The thing is, along those lines is like, it could be 15, it could be 16, it could be 17. Basketball could have 2, 3, 4. That's a humongous difference.
Right. Well, I don't think it's going to be that different. I really don't. And I could be wrong. I think that has become the standard answer. And the key answer for me on that question, and I don't think I think people just kind of assumed it was going to be this way, but I have been around Rutgers long enough to know that you can't assume they're going to do the thing you have to do. Right. I think there were some conversations behind the scenes at some point, whether or not you were going to give $1 million to women's soccer. And nothing against Michael O'Neill's program, but this has got to be the way you got to do it. You have got to give that as much money of that as possible to football, period. Right. And there was no question in talking to Ryan Pisarri that is what's happening behind the scenes. Like, he recognizes that this has got to be giving Greg Schiano, the resources he needs. And I'm going to do a separate story tomorrow on what he said about football. Obviously, all positive. He's not dumb. He's not going to, he's not going to bite that hand at this point when he's an interim AD. Giving all the resources possible to that program, to basketball. I understand what you're saying. The difference between 2 and 4 is big, but I think the answer is going to be around 3, and that's what you're seeing from most programs in that way. The other part of that, though, and this is interesting, and I don't know if I couldn't dive into this as deeply as I wanted to, but he is confident that the clearinghouse, and I don't want to bore you guys if you don't follow this, what's going on in what's happening in college sports right now, is that the Power 4 conferences are going to use a clearinghouse to enforce their own rules, right? And he is confident that is going to really make NIL the real, quote unquote, the real NIL. And he thinks that there's a good chance it's going to work. I don't know if I believe him or if I agree. Not believe him. I don't know if I agree. I've seen a lot of people talk about that. It's just another way. The people will get around it. They'll find a way around it. But he knows more about it than I do. He's talked to people about it. He has seen the inner workings of that world, and has a good sense of how it's going to work. And if it does work, okay, well then Rutgers is in a better spot because they're going to play up to the cap. And that means the other programs in the world, can't. Ohio State's, you can't have fake NIL anymore. You can't pay a guy at left tackle $1 million to tweet 3 times. Right? I mean, that and that's how that's going to work. Like, you would have a quarterback. He has a deal. He's going to make. Someone's going to say you make $5 million for this endorsement. You put it through the clearinghouse and say, no, that's worth $50,000. Right? That's how that's going to work. So. I don't know. It was interesting to hear him talk about it because I do think he's optimistic about that. And if you were looking for a reason as a Rutgers fan to not be gloom and doom about the future, that's kind of it. Yeah,
this was definitely if there's a level playing field that exists based in the new world of NIL and pay to play, it's that this clearinghouse is going to be successful, and the enforcement is actually going to happen. But what level of enforcement is there? That's the question that no one's ever really able to answer. Okay,
right, what are they going to do? Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah,
right. Would that school be punished? Who's going to punish them? Is it the new NCAA?
It would be the Power 4 conferences, I think. So then they could lower the cap. They could take away resources. There's things they can do. You're right to be skeptical. I'm skeptical. Right. Yeah. But look, you have to hang your hat on something here. At least this is
it's a shot. It's a shot. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think anyone believing this sight unseen is being naive. I think it's a nice idea in theory. What's going to happen when the first guy sues the NCAA for putting an artificial cap on his earning potential, and the NCAA gets bulldozed the way it gets bulldozed in court over everything? Right? Like, I think in theory it's nice. Deloitte is going to, they're going to hire some big 4 accounting firm and they're going to do their best or whatever. But Deloitte doesn't care. They just want their money to get paid for this. They'll do their job. The NCAA has no teeth. They can't enforce anything, right? So I think thinking this will be the solution is a bit naive, pie in the sky. A couple other things. About the percentages, I wish the NCAA or somebody would enforce transparency. I think there should be more transparency in college sports and in general. And it's just Obviously, these schools are going to voluntarily give you information that is a competitive disadvantage, but just lay it all out like the NFL or the NBA. This is a professional operation already.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me what the numbers are so that we're not shrouded in mystery over this talking about all these things. The more data points we have to discuss these things, the more honest conversations we can have about these, instead of saying, this school has more NIL than the other. It's impossible to know. And personally, I think the smart thing to do is, for a school like Rutgers that desperately needs as much money as it can, given the deficit it has and its difficulty in raising donations, is putting as much resources as possible into football, which is the sport that makes you money. Put more money as possible into football, make the football team as good as possible. That attracts more fans, more interest, more money, and then you have more money to kind of throw back into the pot, and it's a positive feedback loop. Because as fun as basketball can be, we all know the reality is that football is all that matters in the grand scheme of things, as far as raising money and interest. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, but so remember where he's coming from too. This is as an interim AD, he's replacing Pat Hobbs, who in his 9 years built the basketball facility, built an academic performance center, and on the way out the door was trying to build a new basketball arena. Like, just put that again, none of those buildings are for football. So like the idea that like he told me that his second day on the job, he was meeting with Greg Schiano. A small thing, but I think we all know, if you follow Rutgers athletics closely, that the relationship between Greg Schiano and Pat Hobbs was not optimal, but not great. So the idea that he has been in that building, he's been working with them closely, I think it's important. Like, I don't know if it's going to make it easier for him to get the job. I was pretty clear in my column. I was clear to him about that. Like, I just believe, and I get, the longer I'm around Rutgers, the more I'm certain that this is what it has to be. There's nothing against Ryan Pisarri. They got to hire Superman as AD. I don't know if they can find that person, but they have to exhaust every avenue to find someone who can bring in fresh ideas, outsider perspective. And I know people are going to say, well, why's it got to be from the outside? I understand that. It just does. I just think I think at this point, you need to look somewhere to bring someone with new ideas in corporate world who can raise money, who can trim the fat, who can find solutions to the NIL in the corporate world that they have not found, right? These are things that Rutgers has to do to go forward. And, I don't know who that person is, but that's kind of the priority here. And I asked him about that. He was on it. He understood that perspective. He doesn't agree with it, but he understood it.
The answer to why they need to go on the outside is because Rutgers athletics has not been successful outside of bits and spurts for 100 or 250 years or whatever the university has existed, right? Like, eventually, you got to change something if you want to change the results. You got to get a guy in here who's a winner, who knows what a functioning, proper athletic department looks like, who knows what it takes to raise money, to hire quality coaches, how to support those coaches, what needs to change. Right. They need, if possible, I don't think it's going to happen, they need a complete overhaul of everything, because it's not working. The results are impossible to argue against. That's why you need a new face, because whatever's been happening for the past 20, 50, 100 years isn't working.
Yeah, and we use the term echo chamber a lot in journalism. And when you're talking to people, are you hearing the same thing over and over again from the same people that are talking to the same people? It's the same idea here, right? Rutgers, the people that have been doing this job for 10, 15 years, or anyone who is working under Pat Hobbs, has been hearing the same ideas and the same concepts. So freshness could be a change that's necessary. That could help. So just something else to consider.
And somebody to just raise the bar, right? Like, in the Rutgers echo chamber, success means one thing, right? But objectively, there is a higher bar to hit, and someone from the outside who could add some jolt of energy, of higher expectations, of just trying to raise the floor would be very helpful, I think, because, we'll have some questions here coming up. I saw one question of, like, if Rutgers is able to win its last 3 games in men's basketball, does it change the outlook of the season? And the answer is no. That is an insulting question. No. Like, have some dignity, some pride in your athletic department, and, don't accept this is beyond mediocrity. And the fact it's happening in football and basketball, where people are trying to go in mental gymnastics pretzels to justify 2 below average seasons, is, the nucleus of the problem here is that people, I don't think, expect enough. They don't demand enough. It's kind of like, 17 and 15 with 2 NBA players. It's not terrible. It could be worse. Could be worse. The Rutgers fan base is very Portuguese in that way. Could be worse.
It's good. I didn't realize it was a Portuguese thing. It's good to know. It's good to know.
It's the very Portuguese ethos. It can always be worse. You break your right foot. Hey, at least it wasn't both.
Some other impressions of Ryan. I think I'm not surprised. He has a command of this stuff, a grasp of this stuff. He's been working in it. Told a really funny story, and I led with it about him. He's on a call, taking a call from an important call, getting on the plane to New Orleans to these big meetings. Gets an hour and a half in the air and realizes I don't have my bag. He left his luggage in Newark Airport, and my first question was, "Did they blow it up?" I'm like, what happens when you do that? He's like, no, somehow they found it. But yeah, I expected they would have like a bomb on it and then detonated someplace in the big basement of Newark Airport. Very relatable story. I thought like he's just so focused on this stuff. I like what he said about not being like I think some of us were like a little at first kind of like, well, where the hell is this guy? Like he's not sitting there in the hob seats, and I think part of that is. Like we were used to that. Like that's what an athletic director is for us. The last 10 years is like someone who was going to dive bomb every photo opportunity with field hockey players on center court. You don't have to be that to be an AD. You can talk to people behind the scenes. He was very clear. He wanted the spotlight on the athletes and the players. I think it's part of the reason why he hasn't spoken in 6 months. Not the only reason, but I think it's part of the reason. So yeah, I mean, those good impressions. I think people who've met him have said the same thing. Anything else jump out for you guys that he said or that surprised you or I didn't ask?
Well, I'm curious about Pat. Have you ever left your luggage in the airport or done anything similar to that? Because I do play very relatable.
Eddie, real diehard of this podcast, will remember the story of when I went to the Pinstripe Bowl and left my bag at home. The same exact. And luckily, it was the Pinstripe Bowl. I could drive home and get it. It still made the kickoff. So yes, that is a very, very similar situation.
I left my luggage at home for one game, but since I'm a sports writer, I was like, yeah, I'll just wear this. And the game was like, whatever. I'll just put it. Yeah, I didn't have to go shopping for new suits to wear to the whatever game I was covering in Detroit.
I was much less lower stakes. I left my tripod at the rent-a-car place in Indianapolis when I went there for the Indiana game. I thought I lost it. It was $15, but I didn't want to just lose something. I'd feel dumb. And then I get back to the same place to hand in my keys. I'm like, did I leave something here? It's like, oh yes, you did. It's in the back of the storage closet. So I had a happy ending at least.
Happy ending. That's nice. All right.
On the Pisarri thing, I thought it was really interesting that they're not cutting sports.
I
thought it would be a lock that Rutgers would cut sports. They have 22 varsity teams. A lot of them bleed money. A lot of them are not successful. I think a lot of them would justifiably be cut, right? That would hurt sentimentally. I think logically, I could probably name 5 off the top of my head. I'm not going to, but that could reasonably be cut. And, within 5 years, what did they cut in like 2007? I can't remember what it was. I remember they did something, and now no one talks about it.
They cut fencing. They cut men's swimming. And I think it was just a shitstorm out of it. A lot of negative publicity, and it was not a lot of savings. And I think that might be the reason you're seeing this. But what I think is going to happen, and trying to read between the lines, and I asked Ryan Pisarri this question like in 6 different ways, and it was clear he was being very careful with all of his answers, but I think he was being especially careful with this answer, not to set off alarms down there about it. But I think what's going to happen is a lot of these teams are going to have their modus operandi change completely. Like I don't think you're going to see men's soccer traveling to the West Coast or you're going to see a lot of these teams behaving more like a club team. That doesn't mean they are a club team, but taking buses to Boston College as opposed to flying to Texas, stuff like that. I think it's going to be what's going to happen. That I will say though, that does not save them the amount of money that they're going to spend. And so I'm just very interested to see when Sarge writes the 17 stories next year and the deficit is $92 million, which it could be. Because you can't, and this is the other part of it, like you can't just spend $20 million on athletes without hiring an infrastructure to do that. Like you need lawyers, you need contract people. You don't have that. You need a whole support staff. You need a GM for some of these teams. So it's going to be fascinating because he was not kept that close to his vest, and it might be something that falls on the shoulders of this Superman or Superwoman candidate that we're talking about to bring in here to take over. So
the fact that they're not even remotely close to hiring anybody, I'm not sure I believe that Superman is out there. I think we're probably going to get a Clark Kent.
But we don't know if they've looked yet, though. We don't know if they've actually
come on.
they've looked for.
Come on. It's been 6 months. They haven't looked. They haven't even opened the book to study for the final in 2 weeks. So come on.
But they haven't hired a firm. They've got to. I mean, at least I have not seen evidence. We've asked if they have. They're doing it very quietly. Oh, congratulations about that. Like, I put in the interview request for Amy Towers. She, how about we talk in a few weeks? Oh, okay. No hurry here. I mean, it's just kind of like that's just the way this has been. But there's no president to make the hire, and he's, I've asked for a statement from him. They've checked out there, and they're taking their sandwiches and going to an early lunch out there in Old Queen. So there's no sign that's happening. I mean, we might be here. He might be AD in the start of the fall,
which surprise me. I mean, would be
crazy.
A disaster. But
doesn't surprise me.
On saving. While traveling by bus instead of plane will save money, I think cutting scholarships will save more money than anything, right? Like you're paying a lot of money for people to be on scholarship. And now with these new increased roster limits with a lot of these smaller teams, whenever the House settlement goes through, that's going to be a lot of scholarships. I mean, they're not going to fulfill every scholarship, but you understand my point here.
If you do that, you should cut the sport, I think. If you're not going to give them a chance to succeed, then these teams already don't succeed. Like the volleyball team is already, like there's NIL, there's a world out there. They're competing against teams that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on volleyball players. like, I mean, they're already hopeless.
Nebraska volleyball is the only female sport in the country that makes money. And that's who Rutgers is competing against. And they play half their games at the college half gym. Point taken. Though it is interesting. The one contract I've seen Ryan Pisarri sign since becoming interim AD is an extension for the volleyball coach, which is leading a program that's going absolutely nowhere. Point aside. I had one last point I wanted to make. And, so on saving money, we've seen schools like Indiana, Texas A&M severely cut down their payroll in the athletic department, like people that you have never heard of, people in the background, right? That was one way of cost saving. You asked Ryan Pisarri about that, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And it sounds like it's not happening.
It sounds like it's not happening now, but I don't know. Again, I don't think it's one thing for a permanent AD like at Indiana say we're going to get 25 positions. I don't think it's something that an interim AD can do. I did ask him this. I thought it was a natural time to say, okay, we've got to pay the players. We're adding $10 on every ticket. He did not. He said they're not doing that, and I think part of that is because they haven't been selling tickets to the level that they need to sell, and it just there would be some anger about that after coming up here. So. Yeah, I mean, it's a very fascinating thing. Like, I don't know where the money's coming from. I don't think they know. But Colonel Henry's got deep pockets, I guess, is the best way to put it.
It's one thing if you're Tennessee and you have a waiting list for season tickets for football that is a mile long, despite the fact you have a 100,000 person stadium. It's another thing when you're Rutgers, you have a 52,000 seater, and that place is never full. Point taken. The other thing that I am blanking on here. People, I mean, they've been nickel and diming people with parking, $30 to park in the yellow lot. Right. People wouldn't be shocked by that. Also, allegedly, they have a 77-game sellout streak in basketball, Steve, that you are forgetting about. I mean, 77 games in a row of every seat in the house taken.
Every seat in the house.
And the other point I actually wanted to make that, again, is escaping me. This is infuriating. I have this point I want to make. We're talking about football.
You can't make fun of him for leaving his bags in the airport because clearly you just don't have it together either. I could see you leaving missing the flight.
I wanted to be too snarky about the 77-game sellout streak that now I forgot what I was going to say.
You forgot the real point. There you go. Serves you right. All right. We'll come back to it. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, move on.
Okay. All right. Questions in the Discord. That's some good questions in the Discord. A lot of them dealing with, I love it. This is going to be my favorite part of the show, where I ask Brian a scenario about let's puzzle this out. If Rutgers wins the next 3 games, you're 17-14, you're 11-12 versus quad 1, quad 2. Does that get us on the bubble? That's the first question.
I will tell you exactly the answer because Bart Torvik has a way of simulating this and him giving you, as close as possible. Not knowing what the other results are going to be, but just if Rutgers wins its last 3 games at Michigan, at Purdue versus Minnesota, they would be the 9th team out So they would be on the edge of the bubble. So if they run the table, they will just barely be in the conversation.
The 9th team out. So, okay. All right. That's a pretty big, that's a very large bubble. All right. So let's say they go 18 and 16 and win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. No, 17. So they win 2. They split Purdue and Michigan, beat Minnesota, win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. So then you're 18 and 16. What happens then?
Save your arithmetic. Okay. I will give you a binary, right? Because sometimes the world is just binary.
It's not as
If
fun
Rutgers wins the Big Ten tournament, they will be in the NCAA tournament. I can guarantee you that. If Rutgers does not win the Big Ten tournament, I would bet my life that they don't make the NCAA tournament. Those are the 2 possibilities here.
Okay.
Let's
say they win the last 3, and then they get to the finals of the Big Ten tournament.
That's a good one.
How about
Let's say a meteor strikes every campus that is not.
You're dodging the question.
Is Rutgers going to be the national champion? Or do they cancel the tournament on account of the entire country being hit by meteors?
Let me tell you, you're dodging the question. I think because I found a scenario.
The answer is Rutgers would not make the NCAA tournament.
17 and 14, you're going to add 4 wins. So then you are 21 and 15. You get to the final and you lose to Michigan State. You're
by
not
1
still
point
not
in a triple overtime thriller.
A triple overtime game. You were 21 and 5 with
your full roster, and you're playing better, and the selection committee says, look at Rutgers. Look at what they can do when they have a full strength roster.
Look at that. Dylan Harper scores 37 points in semifinals. Beats
Dylan
Purdue.
Harper scores 50 points against Purdue in the semifinals and wins the game. Here's why it won't matter. The selection committee will be doing this during the entire game. They don't watch the conference tournament. Texas A&M was in an infinitely better position 2 or 3 years ago. They went to the final of the SEC tournament, almost won, didn't, and then they got the boot. I think for Rutgers even. The conference tournaments don't matter. Rutgers will not make the NCAA tournament unless it wins the Big Ten tournament. That's it.
Right.
You are complicating something which is so simple. There's so few simple things in life, Steve. This is so beautifully simple, and you're just trying to jumble it all up for no reason.
Just for the sake of argument. There's no jumbling it up. I just don't think you're enjoying this. I just knew this would piss you off, which is why I'm enjoying it so much.
Just for the sake of argument, get out of here. Trying to own some college liberal here in Fonseca. Just leave me alone. Yeah, because you're throwing out just for the sake of argument. Like that's a valid reason for bringing up something up. Huh?
I can't call me that here. They'll come take me away in Montclair. You call me Ben Shapiro. Gosh, you put a red lawn sign out there. It doesn't matter what it says.
That was the meanest thing I've ever said to you. I apologize.
I live in Nutley like Laney. Get away with that there.
I'm getting back at you for your complete forgetting of our St. Elmo's date that was so impactful in my life that I lashed out and said the most hurtful thing I've ever said about you. I apologize.
Okay, fair. All right, so let's focus it this way, because I do agree with you that we should stop, because they haven't beaten a good team yet. So why would we expect them to beat 5 good teams in the next 2 weeks? The best Big Ten route.
You're incentivizing the people in the Discord, who I love dearly. They're very nice. But if they bring up one more hypothetical, I will punch my fist through the screen. I can't take it anymore. I can't.
I love the hypotheticals. All right. So give me then, this is the question I have. Is there a path? Like, what's the best Big Ten route? And I played with this bball.net site that maps out. I don't know who's got the time to do this. Maps out the Big Ten, the conference bracket. And right now it appears that they are in the 12-13 game against Northwestern, which would be a good spot, I think. Because you play Michigan in the next round and Purdue, which is struggling, but then you got to beat Maryland and you come on the other side and beat Michigan State or Wisconsin, maybe. Yeah. So I just couldn't find a good path. Can you find, if you had to give me 3 teams you'd like to see in those first 3 rounds to give them a shot at the weekend, what would it be?
Washington, Penn State, and Northwestern.
But those are you play those in the first game. Right. Who would you play in the second game? You're misunderstanding the task here.
No, I understand your question. The question is in itself kind of ridiculous, because no matter who they play, they're going to be a worse team, right? So Rutgers' best path.
Worse teams that are better. Yeah, they have better chance to beat. I think they have a better chance to beat. I don't know. Looking at it, I wouldn't want to play Oregon again. I wouldn't mind. They beat UCLA already, you know?
Look, you're going to have to play
It's
one
tough.
of Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin, UCLA, one of those 5 teams in the championship game or semifinals, right? And I mean, they're all bad matchups because they're infinitely more talented teams with better presences inside. And again, the thing is, having Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey is blindfolds for the fact that the numbers tell us that this team is bad, right? Like, that's just the reality. It's a bad team, and no matter who they're matched up against, they're going to be severely outmanned. So the only hope you have of having this miracle run is just going nuclear offensively like they did yesterday, hitting threes, getting to the free throw line, and playing good defense. That's their only hope. And again, we're
It doesn't matter the opponent then? You're saying it doesn't matter who they play.
I mean, I guess ideally you avoid Maryland. Maryland is probably the worst matchup.
Right.
Because they're
Maryland will be the
bigger than
1
you
seed
inside.
right now, right? They're currently, which is amazing. What job he's done.
Maryland?
They're currently the number 1 seed based on this bracket.
I don't believe that.
You don't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think Michigan State is the number 1 seed on account of being.
They're below Maryland and Wisconsin based on round robin record 0-2. Michigan State's 3 in my current Big Ten computations. This is assuming
that's
wins.
projecting maybe Michigan State loses a game or something.
That's projecting things. Correct. That's what it is. Good point. Yes. Currently, Michigan State's 13-3. You're right. I'm projecting where they're going to be based on what they've got left. I'm sorry. So yeah, Michigan State's currently number 1 seed. Michigan 2nd, Maryland 3rd. I don't think Wisconsin's great. I think that's a beatable team.
Did you watch that? Did you see that Oregon-Wisconsin game?
Yeah,
it was wild.
Yeah.
Wisconsin had a 17-point lead. Oregon comes all the way back. It was a great game.
Yep.
Wisconsin elite, and they have an all Big Ten guy in John Tonji. They're really, really, really good. Okay. They beat the brakes off Rutgers at the rack. They did. And I don't want to hear about Dylan Harper being hurt. I don't want to hear about that. And I'm sorry, I'm not being more fun and entertaining these hypotheticals because I know the podcast is about fun, but I can't even get myself to pretend like it's a valid discussion because it's not. I'm sorry.
It's not about fun.
No fun. No fun.
No fun podcast. All right, here. The next question is fun, though. And this has been on our podcast board for a while. I've been waiting to drop this one on you. All right. What do you think is the funniest moment in Rutgers athletic history? And I love it. Like, funniest is a very objective term. And he put some suggestions. The J.R. Inman Facebook post when he came up with Stake of Turmoil directed toward Fred Hill. That's before your time, but that was objectively fun. The Gary Waters first day was when he flew off in the middle of the winter to get inducted in the Hall of Fame. Kent State didn't get back in time for his for a game. He got fired. Kyle Flood traveling to Princeton in disguise, like he's Harrison Ford in The Fugitive. That was a good one. I love those examples, and it's funny. Like, there are things that weren't funny at the time that are funny now. I'm trying to think of some recent ones that are funny. What, you guys got anything? Your funniest moment in Rutgers?
I don't know if it's funny and how the ending of the Hobbs tenure played out, but him chugging the beer at the student alley.
Funny. That's absolutely
that's a good
funny.
one.
That's in the list. One of my favorite is a Keith Sargent story. And I come back to it. I wish you were around to tell it, but when Julie Herman got fired, he was essentially outside of Robert Barchi's house in a bush. And that comes back to me all the time, like the things you do in journalism. And of course, hiding behind bushes don't work usually. And Julie saw him, and that just cracks me up every time I think about the end game of Julie Herman is Sarge behind a bush. That wasn't funny, but the whole, there's no tape was at the time not funny, but now objectively funny because Julie Herman said at a press conference, trust me, there's no videotape. And we had it in 48 hours. It was, again, not funny if you're Rutgers, but looking back on it now, it's sort of like, what? That was an episode that was funny. Yeah, there's been a lot.
There's probably a million of these.
A good list.
They're hard to come up with.
Yeah.
Chris Ash refusing to say who the starting quarterback is against UMass, and then 2 days later, or like an hour later, Cratch had the news that it was McLean Carter. McLean Carter getting a concussion, John McNulty getting fired and McLean Carter essentially saying, all right, I'm out, and just leaving the program.
Hopping in his pickup truck and never to be seen from again. That was a good one. That was funny.
Being related to the Bushes, an assistant basketball coach accusing me of being in the Bushes and filming minors, and just spending time that he should be recruiting and building a program for its biggest year yet. Attacking me and attacking Richard Kent on Twitter. Feels like there'd be a more productive use of his time. But he makes 10 times my salary, so who am I to say? I don't remember the exact story, but like in BC, like the 1990s, something about Rutgers going to a bowl game and them saying like the only bowl game they're going to is the one I'm sitting on.
The toilet bowl one. Yep, that was it. The one I'm sitting on. Yeah, that was Foley, right? Was that?
Yes, it was Foley. Foley. Fuchs tells that story all the time. I'm sure he'll call me or you and just tell us.
How did you get that wrong? I got a call from Fuchs today. I can guarantee it.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. If you have any more, put it in the Discord. I'm interested to know what you think's funny because you guys have been close to it. Oh, the horse story, the horse running on the field. We just did that. It was before my time. It was before my time. It was a long time ago. That's objectively funny. Getting a personal 15-yard penalty for a horse running on the field.
I think Sarge told a story one time about a dog taking a dump in the middle of the practice field during like, I don't know if it was early Shiano or late, whoever was before Shiano, I'm blanking now.
Yeah, Terry Shea. Yeah.
And then a very micro moment, I'm not sure people even remember this, but it was my first viral moment on social media when the worst Rutgers team, I think it was 2018, Art Sikowski throws a touchdown pass. Mike Maietti, so excited, he picks him up, and then in the celebration, instead of tapping his helmet, full on uppercuts him in the face and like almost decapitates him, which is just like the incompetence of Rutgers at that point is they can't even get a celebration right on a touchdown.
That was good. That was a good one. All right. Put it in. If you have any more, put it in the Discord. We're already running along. Let's go wrestling. Positive. Some big wrestling news, right there.
Yeah, that was pretty big news. John Poznansky injury after a long, successful Rutgers career is probably going to be shut down. Not wrestling in the postseason. So I think anyone who's followed New Jersey wrestling has been a big fan of John Poznansky for all he's done. He's been like a class act kind of guy all the way through. So it looks like maybe PJ Casale is going to have that starting spot at 197 for the postseason, and Paz is going to be out with what I guess is a knee injury.
Right. That's a shame. That is too bad. Women's basketball, this is weird. I mean, as bad as they've been, and they're bad, if they beat Penn State in the season finale, they will go to the Big Ten tournament as well. They'll be the 15th place. So how about that? I mean, some other things have to happen, but it looks that way right now based on because Penn State, Purdue, and Northwestern are really bad. So
will Kiyomi McMillan recover from her mystery injury if they go to the Big Ten tournament?
I don't know. We might have some more on that eventually here. We'll see. Baseball, men's lacrosse. You put it both on here. You guys must know something I don't.
Baseball went to Arizona, lost 3 of 4 against Grand Canyon.
Right.
But they met Mike Trout, got some photo ops. So really, who's the winner here?
Yeah, it's in one of those trips they're not going to be taking in the New World. Grand Canyon. Okay.
Men's Lax beat Loyola.
Right.
Kind of bounced back after a couple losses. So, Loyola's not good necessarily, but it's good to not lose 3 games in a row. And if there's a chance to reverse the season, in 2 weeks they play number 5 Princeton, big rivalry game. You win that, you get a signature win. But let's not count our chickens before they hatch.
There you go. All right. Good job, gentlemen. I don't know when we'll record again. Maybe there'll be chances for an emergency podcast here in the next few days. If not, we'll see you soon enough. Thanks for listening. Had fun this episode.